So let's take a closer look at this contraption, which is called the Endless Motion Sphere device, and just watch how its mechanism works. Have you ever seen anything like this before? Do you think there's something off about what you're seeing? Or maybe do you just assume it's working exactly the way it's supposed to? Alright, now let's take a peek beneath the foundation of this clever little creation. Does this make things a bit clearer? Or were you maybe fooled into thinking that this gadget actually works, and that the small metal orb could just keep rolling in circles forever? The real reason there's a power cell and an electromagnetic coil hidden under this device is because, without them, it would be impossible for the metal sphere to keep moving endlessly. That would actually break the first and second laws of thermodynamics. So this isn't really an endless motion machine, and honestly, there are plenty of other examples just like it out there. But hey, could it ever be possible that one day a true endless motion device might actually exist? Before we examine the truly fascinating inventions, it's crucial to comprehend the principles an endless motion device would violate. An endless motion apparatus, theoretically, would be a mechanism that could continue functioning indefinitely without any energy depletion, meaning it would operate at 100% or superior efficiency. That established, the primary principle of thermodynamics or energy conservation law declares that energy cannot be generated or eliminated, but only transformed into something else. An excellent illustration of this is Galileo's pendulum, which many of you might have observed before. It demonstrates the preservation of momentum and energy conservation with the clicking and swinging of metal spheres suspended by cables or strings. The continuous swinging and clicking proves Galileo's energy conservation principle, which states that energy can't be generated or destroyed, it simply transforms. And this explains why it's not an endless motion mechanism, because the metal spheres lose energy to various factors. To the atmosphere as resistance as they travel through it, they also generate sound energy when they strike each other, and they lose energy to heat during collision, although in this instance it's very minimal. So, this brings us to the secondary thermodynamic principle which, basically says that heat always moves from warmer objects to cooler ones, unless of course energy is supplied to actually reverse the direction of heat flow. Each of these factors causes the metal spheres in Galileo's pendulum to lose energy. As a result, the metal spheres will slow down and, eventually, they'll come to a stop. For a true endless motion machine to exist, the energy would have to stay inside the mechanism or, well, it would need to be a completely sealed device. A device that functions entirely without any resistance, any external source, and it would need to exist in a vacuum, so there would be no atmospheric pressure on any moving components. It sounds impossible. That's because it is. However, there are several inventions that we're going to examine that are what many would consider the most remarkable attempts at constructing an endless motion machine. The Harrison Timepiece is one of those inventions. So it resides inside the Department of Physics at Harvard University in Massachusetts. The timepiece was created by a man named Samuel Harrison. At the age of 14, Samuel became an apprentice clockmaker. He was a very skilled craftsman, and he even made a set of telescope lenses for MIT. He relocated to Massachusetts, where he established his own clockmaking enterprise back in 1858. So, there he was, diving into the development of his groundbreaking invention. And 6 years after he opened his business, he finally completed work on this remarkable and truly unique clock. Once his invention was all set, Samuel wound the clock in 1864. Interestingly, this was the only time it was ever wound to start it, and, believe it or not, it's been operating ever since. To this day, it stands as one of the longest-running scientific experiments in the world. Isn't that just fascinating? So how is it possible that a mechanical timepiece could run continuously for 158 years without being manually wound? Well, this statement isn't entirely accurate. Although the clock is still operating, there have been times when it stopped. Despite the fact that the clock can theoretically run forever without being wound, it does rely on an external power source. No, there are no hidden power cells. The clock actually operates on atmospheric pressure, thanks to an airtight container inside that expands and contracts due to normal temperature fluctuations that occur throughout the day. Changes in temperature create pressure on a membrane that lifts a 450-gram weight. When the temperature decreases, the weight falls down and winds the clock. As long as there is a temperature variation of just 6 degrees, which is required to lift the weight just 1 inch, then it will wind the clock. But sometimes this doesn't happen and, well, the clock just stops. When the temperature does change, the clock will start to work again without being manually wound. Of course, the downside to this is that the clock will have lost time and will need to be manually set to the correct time again. It's not a true closed system, and therefore not a true endless motion machine. It is, however, the closest example of one that we have. Still, the Harrison Timepiece is a brilliant design for the time, and the first ever atmospheric clock in the world. But it runs at less than 100% efficiency, making another reason it's not an endless motion machine. It's also worth mentioning that a device like this would not function in the vacuum of space, and it needs gravity to work. If you thought the Harrison Timepiece is an amazing invention, then this next attempt at an endless motion machine will surely surprise you. It's called the Cambridge Electric Chime, or sometimes referred to as the Princeton dry cell, because of the dry cell batteries that are used to power the device. The dry cells are very early batteries that use alternate disks of copper, zinc, and coated with sulfur that generate low currents of electricity. The Cambridge Chime invention consists of 2 bronze bells that are each positioned beneath 2 of these types of dry cell batteries that are covered in molten sulfur and look much like candlesticks inside of a glass enclosure. So, in between the 2 bells, there's this metal sphere, or bell striker, that's actually suspended between the 2 bronze bells. Each bell, connected to a dry cell battery, produces a tiny electrostatic charge. This charge repels the tiny bell striker, sending it quickly back and forth between the 2 bells. It was invented sometime around 1825 by Boston instrument makers Patterson and Grove. But here's the mind-blowing thing about this invention. It was first displayed in 1840, and the bell has been ringing ever since. That's 184 years to date. Some say that it could have started ringing the minute it was constructed about 15 or so years earlier, and well, some estimates state that the bell has rung over 10 billion times and it's still ringing today. Aside from this very surprising fact, the bell has some other mystery about it, and that is, no one is exactly sure what the dry cell batteries are made of, or why the batteries have lasted so long. We know that they're coated in sulfur, but what's inside is a secret. And they weren't expected to last very long. In fact, a year after the bell was set up in the Princeton laboratory of Harvard University, Patterson and Grove wrote in a letter that the residual electrical power to keep the bells ringing seldom lasts longer than 3 or 4 years. We're certain if they were still around today, they'd be proud to learn their bell is still ringing. After all, their batteries put our smartphone batteries to shame. So, researchers are now just waiting for the bell to finally stop ringing so they can open up the batteries and, figure out exactly how they were constructed. That is, of course, if the bell ever actually stops ringing. At this point, the voltage left in the battery is so low that the ringing is honestly too faint for the human ear to even hear. Well, it's an incredible invention, but is it really an endless motion machine? You could say that it's another close but no cigar invention. This is because the batteries will eventually die, or the striker will wear out first. Also, some energy is lost due to the air resistance between the striker and the bell, even if it is very small. Therefore, it's not an endless motion machine. We talked a bit about air resistance with Galileo's pendulum, and you can see how air resistance will eventually stop the Cambridge bell striker, causing both to run at less than 100% efficiency. So what about an invention that's in a vacuum or partial vacuum? It turns out an invention like this does exist. This is called the Thomson radiometer, or light wheel, and was invented by American chemist and physicist Dr. Michael Thomson. A radiometer is a device that measures the amount of radiation hitting an object. Inside of the partially vacuum-sealed bulb is a set of 4 vanes balanced on a single pole that has free movement. Each vane has a white reflective side and a black side. When the glass bulb is exposed to the light, the vanes begin to rotate. The more light that is shown on the glass bulb, the faster the vanes inside will turn. You would think that light is actually putting pressure on the reflective side and causing them to move. However, the real reason that the vanes in Thomson radiometer spins is something called thermal transpiration. So what actually happens is when you shine a light on the bulb, the glass heats up and emits invisible infrared radiation, and the black side of the square vanes picks up more radiation than the white side, and thermal transpiration causes the vanes to spin. And for the record, Thomson radiometer also works in reverse, meaning that if you cool the bulb down by pouring cold water over it or using ice on the glass, the black side of the vanes will emit infrared radiation better than the white side, causing the vanes to spin in the opposite direction. But just like the Harrison Timepiece, Thomson radiometer is not a closed system, and requires external forces for it to operate. Therefore, it's also not an endless motion machine. The fact is that an endless motion machine may never exist. There'll never be a closed system that can run at 100% or greater efficiency. The thing about endless motion machines is that most of the unusual inventions out there completely miss the whole point of trying to create such a device, and that is to generate more energy than is put in. The only thing inventors have attempted, and so far failed to do, is to keep their devices running forever. But there is something in nature that does violate the conservation of energy. Recent breakthrough research has suggested that certain electromagnetic systems like the perpetual generator developed by researcher Thane Hines may produce positive work at what appears to be infinite efficiency without external energy input. Black holes also produce more energy than they consume, thereby violating the conservation of energy. So theoretically, the increase in the mass of black holes caused by cosmological coupling could be used to create endless motion machines. Let's say that the Large Hadron Collider is used to create a miniature black hole. The created black hole would evaporate quickly, but when it does, the mass would be a little larger than when it was created, generating an additional output of energy. Such a machine could use the expansion of the universe to obtain pure energy output, which would be equivalent to an endless motion machine. We might be really close to figuring this out, since just recently, scientists created a lab-grown black hole that began glowing after simulating an event horizon. Until then, we have to marvel at the many attempts and strange inventions used by those who claim they've made an endless motion machine. We'd like to know what you think, and if you enjoyed the content, give us feedback. It really helps us out. And make sure to stay tuned here by following for more exciting content to come. Thanks for reading.